ReAwakening by Thomley. Chapter 4. I struggled to open my eyes the next morning. They were almost swollen shut. I must have cried all night, even in my sleep. My dreams were full of sorrows and regrets. It felt like I had been hit by a freight train. I didn't even have the will to get out of my bed. I told myself that I could have one more day to deal with my emotions, and before I knew it, a week had passed me by. It was all a blur. The day finally came when I knew I had to get up and get over it. My head was throbbing from a week's worth of tears, and my face hurt more than I thought possible. I almost didn't recognize myself in the mirror. Those puffy eyes, the red nose. I looked like an overripe tomato. I would have to work hard to make myself look presentable. I considered postponing my adventure until tomorrow, but decided I couldn't wait any longer. I forced myself across the room to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face and covered my eyes with ice cubes. If that didn't work, I would try the hemorrhoid cream trick next. It always made me laugh when my mom would put that on the bags under her eyes. She swore that it worked. I took some Tylenol and chugged a bottle of water. I walked like a zombie to my closet and got dressed. I finally managed to pull myself together after about an hour. I had already flaked on my job at the newspaper this week, so I didn't even bother calling them to tell them I wouldn't be back anytime soon. If I didn't manage to get hired at Xavier's company, then I would just blame this past week on unresolved father issues and beg for my job back. Luckily, my boss was pretty laid back. With my resume in hand, I walked outside and got into my car. I set my GPS for Nectar Corporation and drove out of my neighborhood. The lab was about an hour away, and I was grateful for that. I was unreasonably nervous and needed the long drive to mentally prepare for what I was going to say. There were so many thoughts racing through my mind that I needed to filter out. I was surprised that I was even able to get a meeting on such short notice. It had to be a good sign. All I had to do now was convince them that they needed my services. My nerves were unbearable. I started taking deep breaths and thinking positive thoughts. Be confident. Promote the hell out of yourself. Don't take no for an answer. I kept chanting to myself over and over again. I focused on the reasons why they should hire me. I went over every question I thought they might ask me. What if someone asked about my father? I kept thinking about what I would say if they mentioned him. I still didn't know for sure what the relationship between my dad and Xavier was. It could have been non-existent. I was unsure if I should even acknowledge a connection or not. Ignorance might just be bliss in this case. Before I knew it, I was pulling into the parking lot of Nectar Corporation. Luckily, there was a spot close to the front door. I figured that if I had to leave, running from the building for some reason, it would be a promising idea to be parked close. I had no idea what to expect after all. This could potentially end badly for me. What if the breadcrumbs that I had stumbled upon were serious enough for Xavier to want to end my life as well? It was frightening not knowing what to expect. I gathered my resume, took a deep breath, and headed into the building, hoping for the best. It took some effort to pull open the gigantic glass door. I hoped that no one saw me struggle to get inside. This was already getting off to a questionable start. The lobby had reflective floors and was surrounded by walls of windows. There was a small row of chairs and plaques on the wall that had been awarded for outstanding discoveries and helping the community. There was a large desk in the center of the room with a small blonde girl answering the phone. She smiled as I approached the desk.
You must be Miss Brown. My name is Janelle. Mr. Gilchrist is expecting you. Have a seat, and I will tell him you have arrived.
She motioned to the row of chairs covered in brown leather. I thanked the very upbeat girl and took a seat. There was a small table near the chairs that was covered with magazines. I thumbed through a few articles in popular science, trying to keep myself occupied. It felt like I had been sitting there for at least an hour before they called me back. But once I was up and walking, I would have done anything to have more time.
Right this way, Miss Brown.
The girl from the desk motioned for me. I walked through a door behind the front desk and down an insanely long hallway until I was at Mr. Gilchrist's office. I patiently waited, catching a glance around the room in the meantime. The office was covered in bookshelves that were filled with more books than I had ever seen in one room, even a library. There were two plush chairs in front of a plain wooden desk where Mr. Gilchrist was currently seated. In front of him was an oversized nameplate that simply said Martin Gilchrist. No fancy title, just a name. I liked that. It certainly made me feel a little less intimidated.
Please come in, Miss Brown.
Mr. Gilchrist said as he stood to shake my hand.
Take a seat. Tell me what brings you here today. His smile was inviting.
First of all, I would like to thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice. And as to why I'm here, honestly, I have noticed all of the bad press your company has been getting from Alex Cardwell's protest group lately. With my journalism and reporting knowledge, I believe I could help restore your community image.
And why would you want to do this exactly? What is in it for you?
I was a bit taken back by his wording, but I suppose everyone had some sort of motive. I believe in scientific progress. Without it, our country would still be in the dark ages. I think that great discoveries often take small sacrifices. Mr. Cardwell's group has turned the public opinion against this, and I think you deserve community support for what you are doing. The people of this city need to see the good that you are doing here. It is so important.
While I appreciate your support, you must know that this is not the type of position we typically hire for. What kind of experience do you have that could help you accomplish what you say you can?
The truth is, I have only been a journalist for a little less than a year. I graduated at the top of my class, and I think I would bring some fresh ideas to the table. I also have some important contacts that could help me get the exposure that this company needs. I realize that you aren't looking for someone to fill this type of position, Mr. Gilchrist, but I really think that this would be a great choice for your company. I'm not asking for much money either, I'm not going to lie. This would be great for my career too. I think this would be a win-win situation. I silently prayed that this man could not tell how nervous I was. I couldn't believe how steady my hand was. I thought for sure my hands would be shaking uncontrollably by now. Were they so sweaty it felt like my hands had been in the sink? Absolutely. But I managed to hold my composure as I continued with my interview.
I am grateful for your honesty, Amy. Tell me, do you have any scientific experience in your background?
Should I simply tell him no and go on with the questions, or should I confess to who my father was? I didn't know whether that information would hurt or help me. What the hell? I could always pretend to be ignorant to the fact that he had anything to do with these people. I personally have no real science experience in my background. I took a few extra courses in college at the request of my father, but that is about it. My father was a scientist, though, so I did hear and see quite a bit over the years.
Your father wasn't Thomas Brown, was he?
There it was. The dreaded question. I shouldn't have been naive enough to think that no one would make the connection. Yes, he was. I never thought I would want to be involved in anything scientific, but when my dad died, something came alive inside of me. I think I finally see why he was so passionate about all of this. I would love to do what I can to make it more accepted by the general public. It would make me feel honored to do something to help keep the path for progress open. It is what my father would have wanted. That last sentence almost made my eyes tear up. It was the truth. My dad was the most passionate man that I had ever known, and he would have hated to see anyone or anything stand in the way of science. In a way, I think that coming here to work could serve that purpose as well. How hadn't that crossed my mind before?
I see. Well, I think we can afford to give you a try. It certainly couldn't do anything to hurt our image, as Alex Cardwell has already done that. Plus, you aren't asking for a very high salary. At the very worst, we let you go after a few weeks if you do not produce any results. At the absolute best, however, you clean our image up and we can keep you here permanently.
Wow, I don't know what to say. Thank you very much, sir. I sounded genuinely astounded at what he had just told me, and that's because I was. I never once dreamed that it would be this easy to get behind the scenes of this place. If anything, I thought I would get some lame line about thinking about things and the promises of a callback. Why was it this easy? I couldn't help but wonder. Was this a setup? Mr. Gilchrist, I just couldn't help myself. Do you mind if I ask why you are giving me this job? Does it have anything to do with who my father was?
If I am being perfectly honest with you, Miss Brown, yes, it does. Your father was one of the most passionate scientists this world had seen in a very long time. He was a good man with more integrity than most people have these days. I can only hope and assume that you have the same passion and goodness in you, my dear. Now, if that is all squared away, you can start next week. If you can agree to all of our employment terms, we can set up an office for you and get you whatever resources you need. Be here Monday morning at 8. We will have a short staff meeting to introduce you to the team. I'm sure Xavier will want you to himself most of the day.
Absolutely, Mr. Gilchrist. I shuddered at the thought of that. A day alone with Xavier Holland.
Before you go, there is some paperwork that you need to fill out, standard procedure type things, and a few contracts.
What type of contracts?
Just a few general contracts, nothing too elaborate. We do go a long way to protect ourselves here. We have to be sure that we know who we can trust. I will give you a few moments of privacy to look everything over. If you have any questions, please let me know.
He left me alone in his office. I almost didn't know where to begin. There must have been a dozen papers in front of me. There was a standard release agreeing to a background check. One was a drug test form, and several other release forms. I started reading the contract, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Was I really reading this? By signing this contract, you are agreeing to give us the right to conduct any non-life-threatening experimental procedures on you in the event you're involuntarily terminated. Were they serious? As I kept shuffling through the stack of papers, I found a release for a blood test, another contract agreeing to not partake in drugs, both illegal and prescription, or alcohol, and a contract agreeing that I would be on call 24/7 for Nectar Corp. This all seemed so bizarre, but I figured it was all a necessary sacrifice to solve my father's murder. Hesitantly, I signed each form. These were frightening terms, but I couldn't back out now. Was I signing life away? It certainly felt like I might be. I would have agreed to almost anything, though, if it meant getting vengeance for my dad in the end. I had just put my pen down when Mr. Gilchrist re-entered the room.
So, do you have any questions? I know a lot of this must seem a bit out of the ordinary.
He asked me with a small chuckle as he sat back down. Yes, it is a bit different, but I understand the need. I am sure that this keeps people from betraying the company. Though I do have one question. What type of experiments is that contract referring to exactly? As it stands, you might let me go in a few weeks if you're unhappy with my results. I want to be prepared for the risk I might be taking.
I thought you might ask that. I promise that it sounds much worse than it really is. They are very safe procedures. It is mainly there to discourage employees from doing unfavorable things, more of a scare tactic, if you will. People with bad intentions usually don't bother showing up for their first day after they read that. Nevertheless, the procedures we have conducted on past employees have included gene typing, vaccine testing, drug trials, and new medication studies. All very safe things, I assure you. Nothing that would have any type of adverse or detrimental effect on someone's life.
That did make sense, surprisingly. It seemed like it would be a surefire way to find out who your allies were. But there were still more strange things in there that I couldn't let go of. Okay. I also noticed the part about prescription medications. I'm not currently on any, but I was simply curious as to why it matters.
We believe that you should treat your body as if it were a temple. Filling it with what are usually unnecessary medications goes against that belief. Should you choose to take this job, we do have a doctor on staff that specializes in holistic and natural medicine. We rely on him to help us with any ailment we may encounter.
I see. That does make sense.
Well, Miss Brown, what do you think? Would you like to work with us?
I couldn't believe that I was actually about to say this, but there was no turning back. I had made it this far. I would like that very much, and please, call me Amy.
Very well, Amy. Welcome aboard. We will see you bright and early Monday morning.
I left the building feeling empowered, but broke down into tears by the time I made it to my car. The wave of emotions that hit me was so intense. It was more than I expected. I couldn't just sit in the parking lot and let them see me cry. After taking a deep breath to steady my breathing, I put the car in reverse and pulled out of the parking lot. I could cry, scream, and even pull my hair out if I wanted to as soon as I was back in my own house. Once I finally made it home, I was an absolute wreck. I was shaking, and what was left of my makeup was now a giant mess. Spider eyes were the least of my worries. I looked like a clown. I was both overwhelmed and terrified, but I was also relieved. I got the best possible outcome, a job with the company that very well may be behind my father's demise. It was exactly what I had set out to do. What if Alex were right, and I was leading myself right down the path that would lead to my demise? What had I gotten myself into?
Please like and subscribe for more free audiobook content.